Hi, everyone, and welcome to my talk today on benchmarking your cloud maturity. My name is John McLaughlin. I'm a director of product management for CloudHealth by VMware. CloudHealth's been in the industry for the last 8 years, working on trying to optimize your ability to use the cloud resources offered by AWS as effectively as possible. And so my background actually started 20 years ago in the data center, but in 2008, when AWS released their cloud, I was fascinated by it and have had a career in DevOps since then, working on figuring out what the best ways to use the cloud are. So our agenda today is to talk about what are some common cloud management challenges and what do we need to do about them? And what is a cloud center of excellence? How can companies of any size really get leverage from using common concepts to help each other to make a better cloud experience for your development teams? And then I want to go over a framework for thinking about cloud maturity and how you can assess yourself and your teams to understand where you stand together. And then lastly, I'll go over some examples around policies and best practices. How can we build a better cloud together? How do we show what needs to change to really be successful? So sort of cloud challenges to begin with. The first thing is the cloud brings great dynamicism to your environment. It allows you to launch more machines and new services. It allows you to have the flexibility to connect different things together easily. You know, long gone are the days where it's hard to provision or it's hard to get the pieces that you need to work together. And this gives a better customer output, right? You're able to deliver more code more quickly with higher quality, and that's great. But what ends up happening to a lot of people are that it's easy to, with all the freedom that the cloud offers you, lose sight of some of the controls that you need to be successful. So you need to be able to make sure that you're landing a story where you're not overrunning the budget, or you're not governed by great policies, or you're not able to optimize the things that are important to you. And so today I want to talk to you about some common cloud management challenges, the things that we as operators and administrators and developers all face every day in our cloud, right? And so kind of walking up from the bottom of this slide, what you see here is that we've really taken on a huge amount of different technology into our ecosystem to be successful. From IaaS and the ability for you to launch EC2 instances, to what we're doing with EKS and Kubernetes, to PaaS services, you know, the DynamoDBs or Redshifts or RDSs, to SaaS services, right? The ability for you to connect services that augment what you're able to do in the public cloud to your own application logic, right? What is the code that is driving your application specific to you? And the first thing in cloud management that you have to understand is how to turn the lights on for all of that information. And the way that we see people doing this most successfully is through an integrated data layer, right? Model the information to all the different assets you're running. Understand what it looks like from a VPC to an EC2 instance to an EBS volume to an EBS snapshot at any level. And make sure that you understand when you are making changes, what will be affected, right? If you make a change to a load balancer, what changes for the application? And then when you decide that you understand kind of the picture of the whole environment and ecosystem that you're running, you need to drive governance. And so that means really understanding what has changed, what is changing, and what needs to change to be more successful. So when you look at the thresholds of your modeled infrastructure and say, I'm performing well, or I have the right security level, or I'm hitting the right cost of goods sold, that needs to be monitored at all times and continuously adjusted to make sure that when you make changes in user behavior or you make changes to your application, that you're covering what those changes mean to your cloud investment. So there's a few disciplines in cloud investment that I want to go over today. I'm especially going to spend time on cost and optimization and security, but there's other things that we need to worry about across the cloud, things like provisioning and orchestration. How do you get your application to production? How to operate, monitor, and manage the SLAs of your application? How to allow developers easy access to primitives around your application so that they can start making new applications more easily? And then how do you tell a story using the best of breed tools in the ecosystem around us? Your metrics providers, your governance providers, your security providers. You have to bring that all together and be able to collaborate and share around it. And then ultimately, us as technologists are accountable to the business. And the business wants to know what our KPIs are and what success looks like. Is it a cost per user in the platform? Is it a cost per API call? Is it a security posture that you have to maintain, or a governance level, a standard that you need to maintain? So this business intent then feeds into the system that you've built to really drive outcomes at the level that you need them for. So let's talk a little bit about how you can leverage something centrally to help handle the changes that are happening in a distributed nature across your enterprise. We call this a cloud center of excellence. That's sort of the term that's arisen naturally around this concept. But there's other names for it. You might see it as a cloud business office or a community of practice using something from the Spotify model. But what they do is very similar, right? They care about how we're executing a cloud strategy. And they care about how different teams of every type of persona can talk to each other and evaluate and utilize the right technologies at the right price in the right way with the right performance characteristics. And so, as you can see, there's a number of steps that you have to take to be successful at this. Being able to observe changes in the market, being able to understand the technology and what tools will best be leveraged in your environment. This is the enablement that a CCOE creates to allow for your team to be able to have the best outcomes in the cloud. All right, so who makes up a cloud center of excellence? It can be any of a large number of different personas cross-functionally across your enterprise or your team. And sometimes the same person might occupy two of these slots at the same time, right? You may have somebody who does infrastructure and operations and security and compliance if you're in a smaller company. Obviously, in a larger enterprise, you'll end up seeing that these roles get more and more filled by individual specialists. But the problem with specialization is that you get isolated and you can be siloed. And so the Cloud Center of Excellence is breaking down those silos and really allowing for these different people to take their functions and apply them to the cloud correctly. And so that might be how an executive gets information about their P&L statement, but it also might be how an infrastructure and operations engineer, decides which IaaS components that they want to utilize across the EC2 ecosystem. So the idea is that you bring many people from different walks of life together to be able to drive best practices that are cohesive, that they work well with each other, and collectively that people agree that there are standards that you need to operate on. So what are some of those standards, and what does a cloud management platform as a tool offer to a cloud center of excellence? Well, once you've decided who the people are and what roles and responsibilities they have, and once you've decided how you want to be governed, what standards you want to hit, and what you want to be careful about, it's important once you have the people in the process to set up tooling that enables that journey, right? And the journey has to be both flexible enough and generic enough to hit on the different standards that you want to hit, but also be rich and in context so that you can drive outcomes that are meaningful. And so what we believe here is that, a platform that supports those outcomes both at the line of business and at the central level, and both at the technical level and at the non-technical level, will drive the best outcome for a team that's trying to build governance and best practices. So how do we judge how we're doing, right? At the high level, what is maturity in the cloud? What are the things that you need to look out for? And what builds up those capabilities so that you have the most sophisticated approaches to getting value out of your cloud investment? It starts with visibility, right? It starts with the ability for people from different walks of life to really be able to understand where the lights are turned on in the building and how you can operate the environment that you've got. It means understanding your performance characteristics and your security characteristics. It means understanding what happens from a finance position as you change and modify your workloads. And so the next step up once you have visibility into your world is to get the recommendations that you need to be successful. What are the things that we need to go and tackle to be successful in the system? And tied to recommendations is a continuous compliance to what those recommendations are and what the opinions that you want to hold about your environment. If you want people to rotate their passwords every 60 days, you need to know that X number of passwords haven't been rotated. And so governance and automation drive that story of at least notifying, but ideally taking action against the ability for you to deliver against a governance story. And then finally, it's tying back into that business concepts, right? It's really being able to drive a KPI, a dashboard, visibility into engineering management, out to executive management, and down into the field teams so that they understand what you're delivering and why it's valuable to the ecosystem. So we'll go a little bit deeper here, right? What are some of these steps? What do they tangibly mean, right? So in visibility for cloud financial management, it may be an accurate show back or charge back model, right? And that may be something initially you have to do by hand, and it happens quarterly, that you want to get to the point where you're doing it automatically, where everyone can see it, every hour, every day. As you walk up, it's optimizing your costs, right? It's the steps of right sizing and reservation management and savings plans management and policies to turn off zombie infrastructure. And as you step up, you need to be able to automate those controls so that you get the outcomes that you want, and continuously do this measured against the KPIs. Similarly, in an operations standpoint, where most of the people who attend AWS's summits and other shows are focused on, is really being able to get the configuration story right and getting the performance story right. So defining those standards for what makes an application healthy and being able to drive those things is critically important. And then being able to fix and remediate and change your environment to make sure that you're keeping up with what's happening is critical. And then finally, you have to drive what is availability, what is reliability, what is the abilities that you need in your environment to be successful. Finally, on the security and compliance side, you're talking about a function that is critical to a production workload, right? You're not able to do the ability to release code unless you can know it's secure. There's been many things that have happened in the news recently. I won't call out any one company where a misconfiguration has led to a data breach or a misconfiguration has led to ransomware. It's unfortunate, but the reason why those things happen is because the cloud is becoming more and more complex than us as human operators can manage. And so that's where tooling needs to come in to do risk assessments, understand what your posture is, understand what a threat assessment is, and establish guardrails so that you're able to manage to that, so that your governance and risk assessments are being managed, right? You need to be able to see that from both the security professional standpoint, but also from the operator standpoint and the management standpoint. So it's really important that you meld these things together, that you build collaboration across these things, because there's always trade-offs. If you want to have 100% security, you're going to have a much tougher time operating your environment, and it's going to cost you a lot more, right? So you're balancing these things through your maturities. So with that, I just want to talk about some best practices and really understand, what can you do, out of the box to sort of make your life better right away? Because when you don't have these things, you can dive 1,000 paper cuts of people not really understanding what's going on, not really knowing what they have to change. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what are some things that you can change, incrementally to be able to get to a good outcome. So the first thing is establishing a CCOE, formally or informally, is critical. You need to know who the people are that you need to collaborate with to make a message and a story back to your team that you needed a constant investment in your cloud strategy. And so this will build up over time. You have to build trust and you have to build understanding, both in the line of business and across DevOps and across central IT and cloud ops and other personas, right? So break down those silos. Figure out who in your environment are the ones who care about this. Talk to management. Get executive sponsorship where you can. Figure out who your stakeholders are, be it development, but also your customer, kind of on both sides of the equation there. And what do they care about? What do they need to do? And so help people understand why this is an important mission and why it's something that it's critical that you get done. And then show with data, quantitatively, how you're getting better, right? How you've saved money, how you have a better security posture, how you've shown a team that they may not be hitting the mark on certain capabilities that they need to hit in relationship to every other team in the business and in relationship to the market as a whole, right? So being able to benchmark yourself and manage yourself against those benchmarks is critical. Secondarily, the very next step is you need to make sure that your lines of visibility are tight. If you don't have strong lines of visibility into your ecosystem, you really don't know what's going on. It just takes that one rogue machine that someone launched off to the side to create a really bad security vulnerability, or to cost a fortune, or to breach your governance best practices and not be able to account for what's going on in your environment. So the trick is to classify everything, right? And by default, you may not know about everything, but you want to be able to see everything so that you can get better and better at building dynamic rules for classification. And some methods for classification might be, by region or machine type or by name, But the most common one that we see in the public cloud in AWS is tagging, right? And AWS has done a remarkable job over the last 15 years, sort of driving tagging as a great way to set metadata around a key value pair that will enable you to really understand where things are. We see customers set tags for things like high-level business units, line of business, all the way down to an individual person with an email address so that they can address vulnerabilities directly at an owner's level. So the goal here is get your allocation right, get your ability to do all the work that you need to understand your workloads and translate it from the raw data that you get from the cloud into something that is appropriate to your business, right? That it's a business grouping that talks about your workload, your application, your team, your product line, more than it talks about, hey, EC2 or hey, DynamoDB, which is too broad to really control effectively. You don't know necessarily who owns what table or who owns what machine without a way to classify them. Secondarily, when you start looking at things like historical trends, you might look at usage trends or cost trends or performance trends. In this example, we're looking at a cost trend. And what we're saying is, look, there's something that happened earlier in the year that we don't really understand yet, right? These are assets not allocated in the projects that you need to go figure out. But with good visibility, now you've circumscribed the problem. You know exactly what you need to look at to be successful. And so those are the things that you need to be able to click into and drill down into to understand. You need to be able to see it from the project view, and then what's outside of the project. Did something happen that you weren't anticipating that is important and material to your business? And in this case, a $200,000 purchase that wasn't attached to any project happened. That's a serious deal. That's something that, you know, can change the outcome of a public company or make a private company have to write a check that they don't want to write. As you keep going, you know, you need to optimize for these changes, right? Now you've visualized them, you know that they're there, but what caused them? What were the recommendations that we didn't take or didn't anticipate that caused the problem? Was it the fact that we're not getting great lift from the right machine types? Was it we weren't able to buy the right commercial vehicle like a convertible reservation or a savings plan to cover on a cost and you lost 40 to 70% of the value just by letting something expire, right? So there's a lot of different ways to optimize, from zombie infrastructure, you know, being able to turn things off, to being able to manage terminating instances that are just not valuable anymore, and looking at, you know, what the auto-scaling groups that you're running are and what do they mean. Looking at right sizing, right, you may take a look at a bunch of different metrics. You might say, well, for a server, I need to really understand a number of things about it. I need to understand CPU time and memory and disk and network and a bunch of different statistics. For a database, you might need different metrics, right? You might want to measure how many connections you have, how much memory you have. And then you want to get a recommendation that tells you where to go, right? This is based on the heuristic workload that you have. We recommend that you make this change so that you'll have better safety, more performance, and potentially save money, all in the same motion, right? So our goal here is to help you right size and automate the capability that you need to keep in alignment with what your workloads are doing. Similarly, around governance, right? This is this engine of policies that you have to have. Policies drive the world, right? When you look across all the different platforms that are available, policies are the thing that allows you to control what is changed in your environment. And you can do this two ways. You can do this at build time, right, as proactive policies, and you can do this at runtime. You know, after something's been launched, look at it retroactively and decide that that there's a problem. But the critical thing is that you cover off on everything running in your ecosystem. You can't have a partial story and expect to be well governed. You have to make sure that you tie off on everything that's been classified and things that haven't been classified. And so there's different ways to manage policies. Some people just want notification and to really understand what changed. Other people want to really automate things out of their lives permanently, right? So if you have a backup policy where you don't need snapshots for more than 30 days and you just need a tool that will just go and do that for you, that's important in a governance story. As important as saying, hey, there was a change in the spend in this application by more than 10%. We're going to blow our budget, and please notify the owner of the application to say their choices are currently impacting them, be it projected cost or actual cost, and you have control over that. And then finally, the ability to look at things like the Center for Internet Security or the National Institute for Standards and Technology. They all put out best practices and standards for us. And the problem is adhering to them, because it really only takes one fumble of the ball on a configuration or one Terraform commit or one problem like that can leave you exposed. And people are scanning all the time now looking for those exposures. And so you really need to stay on top of, how do I make sure that I have the full layers of security enabled at configuration, at the endpoint, at your firewalling, and at your network layer, so that you can control the outcomes that you have with the most responsibility. All right, so an anatomy of a policy in this case, right? You need to be able to look at the different assets in a different way, in context. So in this case, for instance, in this policy, we're looking at a billing statement. But you could look at an EC2 instance, or you could look at a DynamoDB table and have different policies in context to what's important to you. Is it missing an important tag? Is it running too hot? Is it costing too much? Is it not secured? Is it not hitting a standard for security? And so you set the conditions of a policy dynamically. You can say what you care about. In this case, what we're saying is, look, if the Paul Revere project goes over 20% more than what it normally costs for 7 days, say something, right? Because this has been a material change. It's not a blip, one day change and we're back to normal. It's something that's been ongoing that you need to take care of. And you can chain these actions and chain these conditions so that you can have multiple all sequenced together or in parallel to make sure that you can trigger the right action at the right time. So finally, what's a good action, right? In this case, it might be just emailing somebody to let them know that, hey, we have a problem. We're spending more than we expected in the cloud. So this sort of classification into condition into action format gives you basically the full breadth of Boolean logic to be able to drive outcomes to the owners of these applications and workloads. So it's really important to be able to set up these policies, be able to manage to them, and to apply them both broadly or to a given workload or application. In this case, we're just looking at the Paul Revere project, but you could see running these things across all of your environment. And so this is a list of some common policies. I've already talked about a lot of these. A projected cost increase where at the beginning of the month it already looks like you're going to miss your budget. Knowing that 30 days early would give you the ability to maybe adapt and adjust to what's going on. Being able to terminate storage volumes that you don't need anymore, or instances, turning them off at night when you're not using them, turning them back on in the morning when your developers come back in to do work. There's a lot of different capabilities that you get here. So the next section here is around KPIs. And KPIs are really important. It's a simple enough concept to say, hey, there's a numerator such as number of users of the platform, and there's a denominator of how much does the platform cost. When you divide those things, you end up getting a rate, right? And rates are what KPIs are based on. And there's a ton of different types of KPIs that we measure, availability KPIs, scalability KPIs, cost KPIs, there's tons of customer satisfaction or product satisfaction. There's qualitative and quantitative KPIs that you measure and you keep measuring. But you need somewhere to bring those things together for technologists to be able to see, hey, I'm materially doing better or I'm doing worse. I need to know the delta change between where I was in performance at my last release to my next release. And so enabling a world where your CI/CD is tied into the ability for you to see what those changes mean is a critical way of handling change in the cloud, rapid change in the cloud. These days we're releasing 10, 50, 100 times a day. That means that there's huge amounts of volatility in what might be in production. And you need to keep an eye not just on the security regressions and the performance regressions and all those things, but you also need to keep an eye on what does it mean to my business KPIs. And so we want to drive a KPI-driven approach to solving the problems that are happening in your ecosystem. So let's bring it all together. Let's talk about the collection of things we just explored. First, let's get visibility right. Let's make sure that you see everything and that you're not dropping anything on the floor. Next, let's get the right recommendations for optimization. Let's make sure that you can take those recommendations and act on them, right? So if there's a control from the Center for Internet Security, that you can see what that policy means, why it's important, what the rationale is, and then what you actually need to do to go solve it, and what assets are affected. Next is sort of this automation piece of once you set these policies up and you understand the recommendations, taking action right away, right? If there's a machine that's launched that doesn't conform to what you care about, the wrong AMI is launched or the wrong system, you might want to shut that down right away. You may want to just take the hit and say, this is wrong. I need to control my environment. This is what I need to go do. And then finally, as we just talked about, tying it back to the business, right? In isolation, it's fun to play with technology. I've done it for years and it's great. But, in a tough market, you actually can set your margin to the cost of goods sold, right? You may do a cost plus model. And so every dollar that you can save there, one way to look at it is it's profit to your company. Another way is to look at it is it's the next developer on your team. And in my career, that's what I've looked at it as. So every 10 to 15K you save, hire somebody else, right? Because you've just permanently saved another headcount in your environment. So it's exciting when you can kind of gamify it a little bit and understand it that way. And so just going to go over a couple of case studies. Intuit, company that's near and dear to our hearts is, every year when we deal with our taxes, they were able to take advantage of the data that we offer and really realize savings immediately in their ecosystem because they run a gigantic ecosystem. It's very complex, and they needed something that really drives home how to respond to key factors within a cloud environment. So super interesting customer, have had a great experience with them over the years, really been partnered up for a long time and had a lot of success. Another case study that's probably closer to what you see on the AWS show floor is Sumo Logic, right? The company that I've seen at the show for years and years and years. Super interesting what they do around log management, but they've really evolved their product too. And what they needed was really that insight into all those different project lines that they've built up and being able to see what's changing for each of those products, projects, teams, and owners. And so they've really been able to drive innovation by giving the insight and kind of smoothing out the friction of what's going on in my environment and what does it mean. So what is the strategy of a CCOE? It's gaining visibility, getting that collaboration, having a strategy, having a partner to help drive that strategy with you, getting the innovation you need, making sure that the agility of your teams is not compromised, and also maintaining control centrally so that you know what's going on and you can point out the errors and the problems that might exist in someone's ecosystem. So with that, just some trends in the market. We looked across our customer base and kind of verticalized them and try to figure out what they mean. We're seeing growth in the cloud big time. We're seeing even in the financial sector, which is classically very, close to the vest, running in the data center, kind of, they're growing, right? IT teams across our environment are adopting the cloud. And places like the retail space, which Amazon's famous for, are going to the cloud also because they realize that this gives them better lift on how to deliver. Similarly, in media and entertainment, gaming and the ability to deliver TV and movies, also starting to do more in the cloud, as well as services organizations, consultancies. The biggest consultancies in the world have shifted and pivoted towards using the cloud. It's really, recently that we've seen a downturn in travel and hospitality there. And it's interesting to kind of note that, we expect this to rebound. We expect this, that this is something temporary that's going on right now. So what we offer today, if you feel like doing it, is just going on our website. You can just click in, do an assessment using the materials that we just went over, figure out where you live based on the questions that we can ask you in the maturity curve, understand where there's different maturity. Feel free to kind of kick the tires on it. Let us know what you think. Give us feedback. Email us. I'm really excited to communicate more with you about what's going on. And with that, obviously you can come on to the CloudHealth Tech portal, do a free trial, connect up your data, see what we can tell you, and then walk away if you feel like it, or if you really see that there's value there, continue with us. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.